Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Shop Philosophy. As always, I'm your host, Killian Hobbs, managing editor for Being Libertarian, LLC. So for today's episode, just before we dive in here, just want to give you a quick update on something. The book that I've got coming out is in its final stages for the background editing phase. We're just doing the basic indexing, setting up the cover for it, everything like that. So you'll probably see me talking about that a fair bit because I'm kind of excited to have my first published book coming out. So definitely going to see a lot of updates coming out regarding that. And there's also been a lot of progress on a little thing I'm working on that you may or may not have heard of. I'm one of the contributors behind a documentary that's coming called The Monopoly on Violence. If you haven't had the chance to take a look into it yet, you can find links to it on social media. You can find it on Facebook there, and you can also go through there to get to the site, see how to donate and contribute to getting the film off the ground and get it running. And there's also a lot of little extras that are available for those that are donating to the film before it actually releases. So definitely something to look into there. So for today's episode, what I wanted to talk about was a tipping point. Well, not a tipping point, but the tipping point. Now, we're all familiar with the phrase tipping point. It's that point where that one last little bit is all that's needed to make you completely flip over to something different. It's the point where, the stress gets too much and you just need to take a step away. It's the point where the straw breaks the camel's back. It's that little last push that's needed to guarantee that you're going to win something. In all varieties, we're aware of the idea of a tipping point. But the question I want to bring up is, what is our tipping point ideologically? When we think of the kind of beliefs that we hold, whether they're philosophical beliefs, just general personal beliefs about life, where we stand in the world, everything like that, there's usually a certain level of open area we give to those ideas that we cherish. So what I mean with that is we take the ideas so far until we reach something we agree with, but we're not inclined to push them further. We don't take what we say we believe in to its fullest conclusions. We don't necessarily push them as far as they need to be pushed in order to reach something that might be a little closer to the truth or something more aligned with what we believe, or even to give ourselves a better understanding of what we actually believe and why we believe it. So the core principles, the core values that we have that lead us in the direction of different beliefs we have. I'll use a personal example with this. Quite a few years ago, I would have been considered a classical liberal. Now, if I'm going way, way back, then I'd probably be definitely not as bad as the Bernie bros, but probably on point with what would be the Canadian Liberal Party. This is quite a few years back at this point, so it's been a fair amount of progression for me over the last few years, just ideologically, with my understanding of economics, philosophy, et cetera, to bring me to where I am today. And I got there simply by pressing the ideas that I currently held. A lot of the core values and the core, not necessarily the core beliefs, but the core reasons for why I believed in the things I believed, I still believe in. They're still the things that I hold value to. They're still the things that are of importance to me. It's just that by pushing those items to their logical conclusions, I've reached the newer stances that I have today. I'm sure that most people that have found libertarianism have gone through the same rough kind of process. Very rarely do I come across people who started as libertarians and have stayed that way the entire time. They're usually either they become a more niche version of a libertarian, taking on a very specific subgrouping, whether it's um, anarcho-capitalists, market anarchists, black flag anarchists, Georgists, classical liberals, minarchists, etc., etc. Most people find something more definitive to latch onto in their definition of their ideology, even in an ideology as relatively, I don't want to say small, but I'd say specific as libertarianism is. Libertarianism is an umbrella term for the ideology, and there's tons of little ideologies that fit underneath it. But I mean, it's not as big of a tent as just saying that you're a Democrat or just saying that you're a Republican, or even just something as generic as a conservative or a liberal. Those are tents that are far larger, that house so many other varying ideas within them that you'd think that the contests that you find inside of libertarianism are almost petty. In many cases, they usually are. But what's the tipping point for your beliefs? That's the question that I think everyone needs to ask themselves, even if they've already gone past a tipping point and brought themselves to say, yeah, this is what I'm at now. Okay, push the boundaries on those beliefs. Ask yourself, okay, do these beliefs hold up? I need to compare these to what I used to stand for, what I stand for now, and for the ideas that oppose what I'm standing for now. A great example of this was, again, I'll use myself. Like I mentioned, originally the first foray into libertarianism would have been as a classical liberal. I skipped the minarchist phase and jumped directly into anarchism because the ideas that I used to become a classical liberal were based on the values that people should have freedom. They don't need a government bearing down on them. And we need to remove these barriers that we have in our lives because people function better without them. Taken to its logical conclusion, there is no real reason why that doesn't include policing, why that doesn't include military, why that doesn't include courts and all the other things like that. Now, that's the normal one where people get tripped on for jumping the gun between, well, not jumping the gun, but jumping boat to switch from being pro-state in the sense of a classic liberal or the case of a minarchist into full-on anarchism. Funny enough, my tipping point was IP laws. Not just IP laws themselves, but the general idea of consumer protection. IP law was the main one that I found myself fighting on a lot, just saying, how is it that we want to create a system where it abolishes the idea that allows artists to protect their ideas? There needs to be some sort of mechanism to take care of that, and there isn't one in anarchism. Same thing for a bunch of different types of consumer protection. There just isn't a mechanism for it. And as we can see through human greed, if there isn't a mechanism to stop it, there will be those that find ways to take advantage of that for their own benefit and to the detriment of the majority of people. I was proven wrong. I was proven wrong by seeing the kind of damage that IP law does overall. The net loss versus the net gains it's not even questionable. Making sure that, some artists make sure that they get the right amount of money for their efforts. It doesn't really mean much when you consider the damage it does to, like, the damage that pharmaceutical companies do with their excessive IP laws, the amount of damage, the amount of money that ends up going to movie executives and to recording labels and things like that don't even make their way to the artists there. The impact of IP law overall is demonstrably a net negative. We look at the state of policing in, say, the United States, and the amount of issues that constantly arise regarding misuse of force or police as a cause of death, where it's actually a rankable cause of death in the United States. those are things where you would say initially, yeah, it's a bit of a broken system, but how do you have it where without having a singular state mandate the laws and take care of the enforcement, how do you ensure that there's still going to be any kind of cohesive society afterwards if there isn't a cohesive way of applying the rules? Well, as we can see with a ton of cases, David Freeman's Legal System is Very Different Than Ours is a book that beautifully eviscerates most of that argument in general. And we can also see it with just following the logic of the value of markets and what they accomplish and applying those to service firms and getting rid of this idea that protection is in any way, shape, or form different than any other service. For a lot of people, that's the kind of tipping points that I see for people that have found their way into a type of anarchism, is that they realize that they don't need to have a state to have those types of services available, or the ones that are there. Even if there's a benefit to the service, the net negative of having the state being the one delivering it makes it a no-brainer that it's not worth having at that point. For myself, that led me into anarcho-capitalism, which since then I've pretty much transitioned away from. I wouldn't call myself an anarcho-capitalist anymore. The closest for myself would probably be either a market anarchist or a panarchist would be the kind of place that I found myself recently, because if you have anarchism, you can't really subscribe to a singular form of anarchism, because nobody gets to decide what the rules of anarchism are. No one gets to sit there and say, okay, so, say anarcho-communism, the entire world's going to be one giant commune now. That doesn't work. If you have a bunch of separated communes and they're all working off of, say an elected management council or something similar than that, you've just created a government with more steps. It stops being anarchism at that point. The only way it consistently is anarchism is either exceedingly small scale or exceedingly large scale. In both cases, there's so many logistic errors with it, and it doesn't account for those that don't wish to participate in that system. Most of the anarcho-communist friendly versions of anarchism usually declare that, if someone tries to have a capitalist society, they're just going to ignore their concept of property rights and just try to take what they want. That's that type of mentality is pointless. It's the type of mentality that if we actually had a quote unquote lawless society, that's the type of mentality that gets people killed. So when we're looking at how anarchism could realistically work, we have to ask ourselves, well, if that's a fault with anarcho-communism or similar types of anarchism, what stops that from being the problem with anarcho-capitalism? What happens when you have competing ideas of anarchism at that point? And that's what led me to say, okay, so obviously I couldn't call myself a anarcho-capitalist simply because, just the same with communism, you don't have someone sitting there writing the rules of anarchism and deciding exactly how it's going to work. So you're going to have competing systems. You're going to have it where some communities are going to go the communistic route. Some communities are going to continue trucking along using capitalistic systems and money and markets and all those sorts of fun things. Some people will come up with completely different systems of self-management. Some people might even create the equivalent of a government again, just as a way of organizing things in the community. Now, granted, if you had a government in anarchism, as strange as that sounds, it would at least be consent-based. There wouldn't be any implicit agreements like the idea of a social contract where people are automatically indebted to this existent government that they've created. That idea, I think, if we ever actually reached a form of anarchism, which would involve a lot of people agreeing to it ideologically before we could actually push for it globally. But assuming that we ever got to that point, I don't think that anyone would allow a government to form in the same way that we understand governments today, which overall has still been net positive if that's the way that it goes. My point with this kind of just chain of logic here is that even if you think that you've reached the answer where you've passed that tipping point, you said, okay, so, this is what I believed in, but you know what, just pushing those questions just that little bit further shows me that this isn't my stop point. There's something that doesn't align with what I value, or it doesn't align with the way that I'm viewing things. So if I take this to the next step, I'm passing that tipping point, and now I've got an entire new ideology to learn and become familiar with and see if it still holds up after I go through the same process all over again. I'm pretty sure, give myself a few years, I'll probably settle on a different answer just based on new knowledge that I've gained over the years, or just different arguments that I've come across that I might not have considered originally. This is the process of personal evolution that we should all be striving to maintain. We should always want to grow and develop and test our own ideas. We hear the concept of cognitive bias quite often, or just even confirmation bias, which is a different version. No, that wasn't a slip of the tongue or anything like that. That was just, there are different types of biases that people can hold. You can find where once people reach a certain ideology, they start getting set in their ways. If they had to go through one of those barriers to say, okay, I was completely wrong, here's my new stance. No offense to some of the people that might be listening, but I find it's like a lot of born again Christians. They cross over, reach this new idea, and they entrench themselves in it. In which case, as soon as they hit that point, the same kind of questioning and soul searching and fact finding and everything else that led them to that point, they shut all of that off because they've hit what they think is the final answer, because they had to tell themselves that they were wrong about something to hit that answer. I find that jumping past that point and stopping there is usually a case of ego more than anything. They've broken through that barrier once, so they think that, there couldn't be more barriers than that. Well, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know. And when I say we don't know, don't mean that it hasn't been discovered or anything like that. I mean, there is more knowledge available in the world than any one person could process on any one given subject. I've had an episode about this before in the past where some things become so beautifully complicated with the amount of avenues and ideas and just general input from the entire human race, and always new information that's constantly being added to the pile as arguments are being tossed over, changed, new approaches are being created, old ones are being challenged and tested. There's just too much knowledge on any one given topic for one person to have 100% knowledge of it. It's just you could devote your entire life to one singular thing and knowing that one singular thing. And there's always going to be things that surprise you, and there's always going to be things to learn. When people have that kind of tipping point where they break through and change their mind, we tend to stop at that point. So my question to you, everyone out there that's listening, is a relatively simple one. What's your tipping point going to be? For where you stand on things. And again, it doesn't have to be strictly political thought processes or philosophical or anything like that. It could be your general thoughts on something that's important to you. Like, say, maybe your style of parenting. It could be the way that you approach work, the way you approach management, if you happen to have a managerial position, or even just general teamwork and how to actually develop a team that you're in, either as a member or manager or whatever else. It could be any given topic where you've had to set your feet down and say that you have a belief in it, not necessarily just a collection of facts, but this is your approach, this is your idea, this is how you think about how this topic works or how this subject should be approached. what's your tipping point going to be to say, okay, let me challenge all of that. Let me find anywhere there's an inconsistency and see if I can get myself to grow past what I'm currently at. Because if you reach a point where you have a perfect answer for something, just by process of elimination, not to say that, every once in a while people can have true innovative breakthroughs when it comes to different ideas, but 9 times out of 10, if you have one of those moments where you think that you've got the perfect answer on how to do things, chances are if it was the perfect answer, it'd be the one everyone else was doing. If it's not, and you think you have something unique, maybe ask yourself, okay, so why am I doing it this way? Why is this different? Does this actually hold up? Are there situations it wouldn't? Can I adjust it to make it account for those? What are some ideas that are completely different that might have components that work and make me say, you know what, that would actually be more efficient than what I'm currently doing. That would be better. That better aligns with my core values. It's important to ask ourselves these things. It's the only way that we develop as people. And when we talk about this too, in order to get to that point, we have to start off by assessing what our values are. So that means having a hard talk with yourself and saying, okay, I believe in this, but why do I believe in it? What is it about this that makes me want to believe that this is correct? Is it simply my observations that it's the best process? Okay, great. In some cases, that's it. In other cases, it might be, I'll use a workplace example. Maybe there's a certain way that you like to approach how you deal with teams. Is that based on just empirical evidence of this is what you've noticed is the best way to deal with teams? Or is it a case where that's the way that you liked it because it does A, B, C for you? It makes people feel inclusive. It focuses on the camaraderie aspect, or does it focus on the productivity aspect? Because that's what's important with you. If we're going back to philosophy and ideologies, what is the core value statement that builds everything else? Because there isn't a single philosophy out there that doesn't start with a value statement. If you dig deep enough into any of the philosophies, even where it would seem counterintuitive, like nihilism or something like that, you're going to reach a certain point where you're outside of just logical progression of ideas, and you're into the territory of I believe, or this is something to be valued. I mean, we see this in the arguments for utilitarianism, the idea of minimizing harm and maximizing quote unquote good. What is good and what is bad is going to vary a lot person to person, depending on how they weigh these things and what they consider to be the true positives and the true negatives that need to be balanced in life. Those can change person to person. Value statements are subjective. So without knowing what your own subjective value statements are, it's hard to see whether or not a certain type of philosophy or a certain type of ideology is going to work. For example, my reason with libertarianism is, again, my value statements is that I find it an affront to have a group of people domineering over other people. I disagree with that as a concept. The idea of people domineering over others where there's no concept of consent, there's no, I agreed to be a part of this team, so of course I'm going to listen to the coach. There's none of that when it comes to the government. There is no choice involved. It's all based on the idea of an implicit contract or the social contract, which is something that I completely disagree with. I find it personally an abhorrent thing. And I could go into a bunch of logical reasons why I'd be against it, but at the end of the day, it's going to break down to I personally disagree with this. Ergo, I'm against it. So I'm going to find philosophies that align with that type of internal belief, those types of value statements. As I've mentioned already, if you're looking to grow and develop as a person, once you know what those value statements are, the next step is to find your tipping point for your current beliefs and see how they hold against your value statements when compared to different types of opposition. Because there might be something that is considered an opposition, but realistically still aligns perfectly with your value statements. It might do it better or it might do it worse, but it's another option that's out there. And that doesn't mean that just because you found something where what you currently believe can't answer a single question that you need to completely flip everything you stand for. I'm not saying anything near that. But what I am saying is that if bit by bit you ask just a few more questions about your own ideas, your own beliefs, your own thoughts and processes, eventually you'll get a more fine-tuned idea, something you're more sure about, something that you've got steadier footing in, that you can have a lengthier conversation without having to stop halfway through to look up reference materials, because it's just going to be something that's so in tune with who you are and what you actually stand for, that the ideologies and arguments you use to back that up are going to become second nature. They're going to be more in tune with everything else about your life, about how you proceed with your life. So, as I've gotten into the habit of, I'm going to end the episode off with a simple question. What is your tipping point going to be? I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. As always, if you are looking to reach out to me, you can connect to me through my author page on Facebook there, just Killian Hobbs -author. I'm pretty responsive on any messages that come through, so feel free to contact there. If you're interested in writing, one thing to throw out there as well is that you can go to beinglibertarian.com/contribute. We actually have a page there for people who want to contribute guest articles to the website. We usually have a pretty good turnaround time on guest contributions, of course, if they make it past the eyes of the editorial board there. But of course, feel free to take a look there, see what the requirements are to send a piece in. And then if you have a particular topic that you've been itching to write on, by all means, send it through, and you could very well see it posted on beinglibertarian.com, and of course, shared in front of the massive audience that we have there. And usually through Think Liberty and sometimes even Rational Standard, which if it goes through Rational Standard, which is our South African publication, then all of a sudden you're internationally renowned at that point. So well worth putting it through. Anyway, as always, if you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, I'll see you again next week.